Hello my friends, and welcome to Baldur's Gate 3's Patch 8. I'm super excited today to be able to bring you the new subclasses, abilities, spells, and effects that are available to characters in Patch 8. There are 12 new subclasses being added, along with a bunch of requisite abilities, spells, and unique powers. And so today what we're going to do is go through each of these subclasses in turn, talk about their abilities and how powerful they are, what they actually do, what combinations you can expect them to be used in, and get a real sense of how this is going to affect character building moving forwards. Adding 12 new subclasses is going to vastly change how we build characters. That represents thousands or tens of thousands, someone feel free to do the math in the comments, of possible new combinations, even if you don't take into account, like, really complex multi-classes. So this is going to give us a massive amount of additional options and really cool new abilities to play with. Each of these subclasses in turn, I think, has unique and powerful skills that are going to shake up Baldur's Gate 3 dramatically. So we're going to look at those today. I'll also be testing each of these abilities and sort of showcasing how they work as we go through them. Really excited, of course, to try these things out. Let's get right to it. I'm just going to go through each of them in turn, so let's start with the Path of the Giants Barbarian. We're going to start with just a normal stat spread here, just to make things a little more reasonable when we actually test things, but obviously we don't get access to our first unique ability for a couple levels, so let's just speed through the leveling process. At Barbarian level 2, we get to talk about Reckless Attack for a minute and a half. And at Barbarian level 3, we finally get to choose our Path of the Giants subclass. So let's take a look at each of the abilities that we get at level 3. Firstly, we get additional carrying capacity. Honestly, that's not going to be a big deal, although I guess if you're doing a dexterity-based Barbarian, the additional carrying capacity can be mildly useful, but this is more for flavor than anything else. But we then get Giant's Rage. Giant's Rage gives us enter a rage and increase in size. So that's going to work with Enlarge. I'm going to have to test if it stacks with Enlarge. So if we can use both this and the Enlarge Person spell in order to get double size increases, that could be a pretty big boost to the Owlbear from the Top Rope build, for example, and give us extra ways to increase our size. Your rage damage bonus is doubled on throw attacks. So rage damage is the +2 damage that you get with attacks while raging, goes up to +3 at later levels. So that's a very small increase. It's certainly not going to mean that this character replaces Berserker as the best thrower at early levels, because the extra attack that you get from Berserker is way better than +2 damage on each attack. In general, but it is a nice boost for a character that wants to maybe both make melee attacks and also be able to throw their weapons. In general, I think that Giant's Rage, because the size increase also, of course, increases our damage. So Giant's Rage is going to be a pretty solid rage. I think it is probably worse than Berserker Rage for sheer damage output, because extra attacks is just so powerful. And comparing it to Wildheart Rage, I think it's going to be stronger than all but Tiger or Bearheart. Bearheart is still going to be the premier defensive rage. Tiger is still going to be the best for lockdown and control. But Giant Rage, I think, is going to be a really nice middle ground for characters that just want to do a little bit of everything. And of course, it gets other abilities at later levels. We also are going to get access to Thaumaturgy, which is really nice. This seems like it might just be sort of similar to the carrying capacity thing and included only for flavor. But Thaumaturgy for a Barbarian is actually a really strong edge for that character who wants, if you want to be making dialogue checks with them. One level in Cleric for a Barbarian, or starting as a Tiefling, as Karlach does, to get Thaumaturgy are really pretty nice bonuses for the character, because advantage on intimidation checks for a Barbarian is really good. Barbarians get a lot of unique dialogues that are intimidation checks, and because the game doesn't expect you to have a lot of charisma or bonuses to those, the save DCs on those, or the DCs that you have to meet, are typically very low. So your Barbarian can get a lot of value out of making those unique dialogue checks, even with very minor bonuses. This makes you way better at that. So Thaumaturgy is actually a pretty nice bonus for a Barbarian. Not game-changing, but pretty good. Overall, I think that Path of the Giants is going to be a solid mid-tier at level 3, on the sort of top end of mid-tier for Barbarians. Berserker and the 2 best Wildheart Rages are still probably stronger at the very early levels, but the amount of damage that you get from this is very high, and so it's going to give you a pretty big boost to your damage output, and obviously being huge is its own advantage because you control more space on the battlefield. Just gonna keep leveling up. We're gonna grab Alert just so it's easier when we test combat. And speed through to level 5 where we get another ability here. We get Boot of the Giants. Getting a unique ability on level 5 is kind of fun as well because it adds even more power spike to your character at a level where you're already getting a huge power spike. Both fast movement and extra attack are really good, and so getting a whole extra ability here is really nice. So this is a bonus action that does 1 damage. I would be surprised if this tooltip is correct. The tooltips here often do not take into account your character's bonuses, so I think this is 1 plus your strength, and it's only showing the 1. So this will be a little bit more damage, but still not a lot of damage. We'll have to look at that once we're done leveling up, whether that's correct. Try to kick a target away. Your chances depend on your athletics and are higher if you're hidden or invisible, sure. So we get a bonus action shove that does a little bit of damage. You can kick targets up to twice the weight that shoving them would allow. So this is going to let us boot around really heavy enemies, which is pretty fun. And of course, we get more of that because we're going to have high strength. We're going to enlarge ourselves and everything. So this character will be able to punt enemies around alongside a little bit of damage that other characters wouldn't be able to move. This is sort of a bonus action attack. It's not really a bonus action attack the way that Berserker Barbarian gets, where you get a whole extra attack. But Boot of the Giants will add a little bit of extra damage as a bonus action, which is always good to have. Depending on what damage riders this uses as well, you could probably up this damage pretty significantly. And repositioning enemies is always good, so this is nice. It doesn't change what the character can do that dramatically, because you could already bonus action shove, but just getting a little bit of extra bonus action damage is pretty good. I also note that this doesn't require you to be raging, so even in combats where you're not raging, you still have the 3rd attack, whereas a Berserker Barbarian wouldn't get anything when they're not raging. So a nice little bonus that's going to help out the character a little bit. Level 6, we get another feature, and this is the one I'm really excited about. Elemental Cleaver. So this is a no action to activate ability that lasts for 10 turns. It doesn't say how many times per rest we get this, if it's limited in resources, so we'll have to test that. But you can only use it while raging, so I guess it's effectively short rest limited anyways, or rage limited anyways. So until the end of your rage, your weapon will deal additional acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage and gain the thrown property. If thrown, it will immediately reappear in your hand. So this lets you turn this character into an Eldritch Knight, so you get a returning weapon on any weapon, and give any weapon the thrown property. That has a mind-blowing number of possibilities. There's a lot of really cool weapons that we can use with the thrown property, and we're going to have to do some pretty extensive testing to see what cool weapon effects actually work when thrown. For example, does the clown hammer that inflicts Tasha's hideous laughter, will that work as a thrown weapon? That would be ridiculous and very, very funny. Some other weapons that come to mind that are really good to give the thrown weapon property just by default, obviously any really high damage weapon like the Hellfire Great Axe or the Silver Sword of the Astral Plane is going to benefit a lot from that. Just having high base damage and being able to do a ton of damage at range is always going to be really strong. Weapons with really strong passive effects could be pretty cool as well. Things like the Duelist Prerogative could give you an extra reaction and still be a really strong thrown weapon for this character, especially if you were doing something with Sentinel for extra reactions. So there's a huge amount of possibilities with this. Because it also gives you the returning property, you don't need to take levels in Eldritch Knight, so you can take 6 levels in Path of the Giants Barbarian and then add in other other classes in order to increase our damage. Now, the one you can't do, unfortunately, is Berserker Barbarian, but so you can't get the bonus action throw that you would get from that. But you could get War Cleric in order to get some bonus action throws. You could add in Rogue so that you could bonus action punt people around and then also throw things like Thief Rogue for 3 levels. 6 levels in Valor Bard could be pretty fun as well. Valor Bard actually gets some pretty nice bonuses as a thrown weapon class. You can see my Valor Bard guide for a little bit more about that. The possibilities with this ability are endless, and I expect to see this show up a lot in multi-classes. I don't think this is going to overtake the 11-1 Eldritch Knight War Cleric or the 8-4 Berserker Thief Rogue builds as the highest damage throwing characters in the game, because getting access to other weapons is obviously a huge advantage, but we do give up a couple things in order to be able to do that compared to those characters. The bonus action throw from Berserker or the third attack from Eldritch Knight. But this is going to enable so many cool builds. I'm just really excited to see what we can do with it. Level 7, we get, of course, Feral Instinct, but nothing new from Giant Barbarian. And level 8, let's just boost our strength. Level 9... we, again, don't get any unique abilities, but Brutal Critical. This does work with thrown weapons, so as a throwing weapon character, you can keep leveling in Barbarian for more damage. You could maybe do a critical hit-focused build as well, because there are weapons that increase your critical hit chance that you could turn into thrown weapons with Giant Barbarian. That would be really awesome also. At level 10, we get Mighty Impel. Throw a creature or object that is medium-sized or smaller, heavier creatures and objects. So there's no weight restriction on this, at least listed in the tooltip. I'm going to check if there is a weight restriction on it in game. And this gives us a bonus action throw. So I guess this is like Berserker Barbarian's extra attack, but we get it at level 10 instead of at level 3. So we can use this as a bonus action attack. Now, it's a little worse than Berserker Barbarian because needing 10 levels means we can't fit in 3 Thief Rogue levels for more bonus actions, but we could use the Helmet of Grit for a second bonus action attack with this character as well, if we want to say it at half health all the time. So you could get a lot of extra attacks from a monoclassed Giants Barbarian. It won't be as many as Berserker or Eldritch Knight, but that's still a lot of damage, and each attack does more damage than those characters do because we're doubling our rage damage to thrown damage. We're probably using a better weapon because of the elemental damage. As well, we get additional elemental damage on all of our weapons because we're enchanting them. So this character will have slightly fewer but much higher damage attacks than the other throwers. We'll have to do a little more math to see how it stacks up, but I expect this to be just monoclass Berserker or 10 levels plus 2 levels of Fighter for Action Surge to be a very competitive throwing build in patch 8. And at level 11, we don't get anything new from Giant Barbarian, and at level 12, we don't either. Actually, let me quickly just scroll through the feats. Are there any new feats in patch 8? They weren't announced, but I just want to check. Yeah, it doesn't look like we got any new feats, which is a little too bad. I would have liked to see a few more feats added. But it doesn't seem like there are any. Maybe I'm just missing one because scrolling through a list like this is difficult, but I'm not seeing anything new. So let me know. Of course, you'll want Tavern Brawler if you're doing thrown weapon damage. Overall, though, I think that the Giants Barbarian is super cool, going to be a really interesting character because it's going to give you so many additional effects for the amount of damage that you're doing with thrown weapons. By adding damage, giving you access to throwing any weapon in the game is just so many interesting possibilities. Let's get into a combat and take a look at these abilities in actual play. Okay, so we're going to just start a combat here. I'll do it with another character so we can use this character's abilities all at once. Sure, whatever. Okay, So we've entered combat and can now enter Giant Rage. Let's see what happens here. So we're gonna let me look at our damage and everything. Our weapon here, 1d6 plus 7 piercing damage. I'm using the Knife of the Undermountain King because I want to test if we can throw it and still get the bonus critical hit chance. Let's go ahead and enter a Giant's Rage. So we do get bigger. This doesn't increase our reach in the battlefield, unfortunately. Some of the enlarge effects increase your character's actual spacing, and some don't. So a little sad that this one doesn't. But we can now, with no action, so this also gives us additional damage on all of our attacks. Let me take a look at the Giant's Rage effect and see if it tells us how much extra damage. So we get an additional 3 damage with melee and improvised weapons, and 4 damage when throwing objects. Cool. Wait, why 4? Why 4 damage? That's not right. That should be an additional 6 damage when throwing objects. Okay, so I think the Giant's Rage is currently bugged, and either the tooltip isn't displaying right, or the actual thing is bugged, and it's only using our base rage damage, not our improved rage damage from being a higher level barbarian to show how much damage we do when throwing objects. That's not that big a deal. So let's go ahead and activate the Elemental Cleaver ability. And this will deal an extra d6 of damage. Obviously, making things do cold damage or to freeze water, making things do thunder or lightning damage to double the effect with wet and apply radiating orbs. Those are all, or radiating orbs or reverberation stacks. Those are all pretty powerful effects as well. The fact that we can give this an elemental tag, have the weapon have elemental tags itself, and then also add the Drakethroat Glaive to it means we can have many different kinds of elemental damage, so that's pretty cool also. So we've got Elemental Cleaver Lightning, so this gives it the thrown property, an extra d6 of lightning damage. It is a light finesse thrown weapon, so we're going to go ahead and... Oh wait, we can just activate this. So we can change the damage type on the fly, too. So if we need lightning damage for one enemy and thunder damage for a different enemy, we can change the damage type on the fly. That's actually really useful if there's encounters where enemies have different effects. Also, I have to say, I really like the visual here. Was a little disappointed that we didn't get more bigger when we activated the Giant's Rage, but the visual on the weapon is kind of cool. All right, let's throw a weapon at this guy. So we're going to go ahead and throw our Knife of the Undermountain King. So what happened here exactly? So we hit them for 14 piercing damage. That included... Yeah, so it only added +2 from our rage twice. It should definitely have added... +6 from our rage. So that's a bug. I'm going to report that. So we should have 2 more damage here. So it deals its base damage plus strength modifier. And then we also did 7 lightning damage. Oh, it added our rage damage to the lightning damage as well. So the additional damage is... The extra lightning damage is being treated as a damage rider source. This is using honor mode rule set, so this is working even in honor mode. Probably also a bug, but that's a huge amount of extra damage. And we did Tavern Brawler twice as well. 2 bludgeoning damage. Oh, because it had resistance. Not sure why bludgeoning damage there. I think it did the bludgeoning damage on top of the lightning damage. So we got the Tavern Brawler damage twice. We got the Rage bonus damage twice. If those bugs do stay in for Honor Mode, this is going to be a tremendous amount of bonus damage, especially if you can add other weapons that are damage rider sources as well. And did that dispel the effect? No, it didn't. Okay, cool. So that's really interesting. Let's go ahead and throw again here. Actually, I'm going to back away and throw, and we can see if we can get the... No, come on. Throw a weapon. Have to click correctly there. Didn't manage to get a critical hit, but yeah, that's an insane amount of damage that we're doing because of the additional damage rider bugs. So I'm very curious if they'll fix those or not, but that is doing a massive amount of damage, even with a relatively weak weapon for the effect. So really cool, going to be incredibly high damage for this character, and this may be the premier throwing build going forwards if those bugs stay in the game. Also, just wanted to do one other quick weapon test with the Sword of Chaos to see if we regain hit points when throwing it as a thrown weapon. So we're just going to try that out real quick. So let's Elemental Cleaver. We'll make it, I don't know, fire damage. And then we're going to go ahead and throw the Sword of Chaos and see if we heal here. Okay, we did not. So not every weapon effect is going to get applied. My assumption is that most of them won't, but some of them will. So we're going to have to do a lot of testing here. But I was just curious if we could make a sort of ranged healing build using the Sword of Chaos that heals you on a hit. Next up, we're going to take a look at the Glamour Bard. Obviously, I'm really excited for this subclass because I love bards, but I am a little worried that it's going to be too broken to be fun because of just how incredibly powerful this character's abilities are in tabletop, especially if they've translated them to Baldur's Gate 3 in a way where they just keep the tabletop abilities intact. This character gets some of the most powerful effects possible in Baldur's Gate 3. So we'll take a look at the abilities and see how they've changed them from tabletop, if at all. Just quickly skimming through here. No new cantrips available. Doesn't look like there's any new spells. And we don't get anything in particular, obviously, at Bard level 1. So let's just speed through the level up process. Level 2, we don't get anything, but at character level 3, we get to take College of Glamour Bard. Firstly, I have to say I really like the subclass icon here. That's very cool. And let's take a look at our unique ability. We get the Mantle of Inspiration. Imbue 2 allies with your vigor and grant them 5 temporary hit points. So, this is a little bit different from tabletop. This is 2 allies. In tabletop, it's 1 plus your charisma modifier, so it would be 4. I quickly checked before recording this segment, and the way they've decided to implement this in Baldur's Gate is you get 2 allies at level 3, and then it scales up by 1 each time your Bardic Inspiration die improves, and the temporary HP that you get will also scale. So at later levels, we'll get 3 allies, and then we'll get 4 allies. Mantle of Inspiration is a huge boost to your survivability. 5 temporary HP at this point in the game is actually quite relevant. Like, for this character, it's a quarter of our hit points on top of our existing hit points. So that can often be 1 extra hit you can take before going down. So really relevant, especially because it's on a fairly plentiful resource in the form of Bardic Inspiration. And if they're hit with a melee attack, so only melee attacks specifically, the attacker becomes charmed. Charmed in Baldur's Gate means that they can't attack the spellcaster. Now, I'm not sure I'm going to need to test this. I don't know if the charmed effect counts as originating from the bard or originating from the character with the mantle on it. If it counts as originating from the bard, so the charmed creature can't hit the bard, that's a lot less useful than if it counts as originating from the mantled character, because if the AI has already chosen to hit your ally, then they probably were just going to keep doing that. So if you charm them with the bard and they can't hit the bard, well, they weren't going to do that anyways. They've already decided to hit somebody else. If you charm them with that character, though, it might interrupt characters, prevent them from doing other stuff that they wanted to do, stop enemies with multiple attacks from hitting your character multiple times in a row. I'm not certain if there's a saving throw for this effect either. It doesn't look like there is in the tooltip. So if there's no saving throw, that could be a really powerful effect that will stop enemies from attacking. Well, again, we're just going to have to test that. Either way, Mantle of Inspiration, very strong ability. Probably not as good defensively or offensively as Lore Bard or Swords Bard at level 3, but still a really nice boost to your character's defensive capabilities in the early game. Could be really useful for a more supporting style Bard in the early game, but the broken ability is the one that we get later on. So let's keep on leveling up. Again, no new spells, it looks like, so we'll just keep leveling. Just going to grab Alert to make combat testing a little bit easier. Take True Strike to annoy people in the comments of this YouTube video. And then keep leveling again. Level 5, we get improved Bardic Inspiration, so that also means we can now mantle 3 creatures, and we get extra hit points. I think it goes from 5 to 8 on the temp HP that we get from the mantle, so that's a pretty big bonus to our party's survivability again. And of course, we also get Font of Inspiration, so it now comes back on a short rest, which is a really big deal, because now we can just have the mantle up pretty much all the time. No new spells at level 3. Again, it looks like I'm just quickly skimming over these, so it's very possible I miss a spell that like used to not be on the Bard spell list and now is, or something like that. Definitely let me know in the comments if there's something that I've missed there. And then at Bard level 6, we get the Glamour Bard's most powerful ability, and the one that I'm worried might break the game just in half, Mantle of Majesty Command. So the way that this works is you bonus action cast it, and you just cast the ability, and then for 10 turns, you can just recast it as a bonus action in order to cast Command on an enemy. This works exactly the same as the Command spell, but targets that are charmed automatically fail their saving throw. Now, I said this when this character was previewed. The number of things that this does that are just absolutely broken in Baldur's Gate is ridiculous. Firstly, we've got Command. That's just one of the most powerful things you can do in Baldur's Gate regardless. Secondly, as a bonus action, you build entire characters around being able to cast spells as a bonus action, so the fact that this character just gets it inherently is incredibly strong. We don't need the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel or like making melee attacks to trigger that in order to do it. We just get to do it ourselves. Thirdly, automatically fail its saving throw. That is an insane ability. Again, this doesn't require like arcane acuity stacking or anything like that. Charmed enemies, so enemies who aren't immune to charm, will often just be affected by this character, are going to automatically fail their saves against Command. If that ever happens, you instantly win that encounter. So Mantle of Majesty, even at base, even without the automatically failing their saving throws, bonus action Command is incredibly strong and a super powerful encounter winning ability. If you do land the charm and they start failing their saves automatically, that gets there's no encounter that you won't instantly win as a result of that ability. Now, you can only use Mantle of Majesty, I believe, once per long rest. It doesn't say here in the tooltip, of course, because Baldur's Gate doesn't like giving information in tooltips, but we'll test that again. But once per long rest, just winning an encounter more or less outright is obviously incredibly strong. No new spells at this level, so let's keep leveling up. And that is the last unique ability that we're going to get from Glamour Bard, but I'm just going to quickly speed through these levels and check if we get any new spell access or anything like that. Level 8, of course, we're just going to boost our charisma, and we'll grab some more spells. Doesn't look like there's anything new at level 8, or at Bard level 4. Bard level 9, again, we get 5th level spells. None of these look new either, though, again, somebody remind me if there's one that is. And at Bard level 10, we get Magical Secrets. Actually, this is going to be a good way to look for new spells as well. I'm just, again, quickly skimming through to see if there's icons I don't remember being here in the past. But, as always, I'm relying on you guys to check things that I miss, because sometimes, of course, I'm just going to miss obvious things. I don't see any new spells. But of course, Magical Secret's still an incredibly strong ability. And we also, at this level, get Improved Bardic Inspiration again, which means that our mantle now hits our whole party, so it goes up to 4 creatures. And the number of temporary HP that we get increases to 11. Now, at level 10, 11 temp HP is much less relevant than 5 temp HP was at level 3, so that the temp HP is much less of a bonus at this level. But the fact that you can cast this once per turn for just a huge healing burst to your whole party is pretty good, right? You can use a bonus action to just give everybody plus 11 temp HP, and that can offset some AoE damage or help keep your party alive in one of the damage race encounters where you're taking constant damage over time, like against Raphael, for example. So there's a lot of different uses for that. Mostly, of course, we're here for Mantle of Majesty, though. For command. We have to pick up some skill expertise, so we'll just do that, and then keep leveling up our character. Grab that, and finally, Bard level 12. We don't get anything new from Glamour Bard. Doesn't look like there's any new level 6 spells available either, but Glamour Bard, honestly, doesn't need it. This character is going to be just cracked, I think. There's no world in which bonus action command isn't a broken ability, so we're going to see this character come up a lot in honor mode parties, especially if we can build it so that we can use that like multiple times per turn. I'm going to test this with Thief Rogue as well to see if we get multiple bonus action casts of it, but let's take a look at the abilities in actual combat. Okay, so first off, let's look at Mantle of Inspiration. So we can imbue 4 allies, and remember this scales by your level, with Vigor and grant them 11 temp HP. You can self-cast it, which is good. That bards, of course, struggle with survivability. So self-casting one of your Mantle of Inspiration stacks is probably pretty important. You might want to put this on like a Barbarian who's going to get hit a lot, plus the Bard, just to make them a little more survivable in the early game, and that will improve your character, your whole party's survivability by quite a bit. So I like how glowy the effect is, but it doesn't actually light the area, right? Let's check. Yeah, so it doesn't light the area. So the fact that it gives you this huge glowy aura, I think, is a little misleading, because these characters really look like they should be lighting the area, given how glowy they are with the mantle. Next, let's take a look at Mantle of Majesty. So we're going to be able to use command, and this does seem to work exactly like the spell does. 20% chance of hitting the Oathbreaker Knight, 70% chance of hitting Madala there. Actually, do I have any spell DC gear on me? Yeah, so does that get improved by spell DC gear, or does it not? Because that would actually significantly make the ability worse. Okay, it does. So you can use spell DC gear alongside this in order to make the saving throw much better. The Oathbreaker Knight, of course, has huge bonuses to his save against this kind of effect, because he's a paladin, so he's going to resist it very easily, but we can use this ability. Let's go ahead and start a combat. So I tried to record a little bit of combat footage here, but when I started the combat, the first thing that happened was Gale won initiative, and immediately threw a firework and torched Scratch, which not only caused me to swear, which I try not to do in my videos, but also, would ruin everyone's opinion of me. So we had to start over. But actually, I think we don't need to enter combat here at all. We can just have our characters attack each other and see what happens with the Mantle of Inspiration. So I'm going to have my character go over here and attack Gale, because he knows what he did. He, of course, uses shield there, but we can keep bonking him. And so then, my character is now charmed. So let's check here. Oh, we lost the condition charmed. Okay, well, we'll try that again here. I'm gonna enter turn-based mode before we attack this time. I don't want to use Karlach. Karlach's immune to charm. Okay, so my character is charmed here. Can't attack the spellcaster. So can I attack Astarion? Okay, so it does count the charm as originating from the character with the mantle on it. That's massive. That means that it is a very potent defensive ability. It's going to break up characters with multi-attacks and stop them from doing anything. And also, the charm did not have a saving throw. So that's going to be incredibly disruptive. That's actually an extremely potent defensive ability that's going to show up a lot. So I expect Glamour Bard to be one of the best defensive characters in the game, as well as having just a I win this fight button in the form of Mantle of Majesty, which is going to just cause enemies to fall over immediately. So let's go ahead and try this again. Oh wait, can't attack my Charmer. So yeah, so we can't also target them with spells. It's not just actual attacks. The charm does only last for 1 turn. But let's go ahead and test Mantle of Majesty here as well. So when we cast Mantle of Majesty, we can't hit an ally with it, but we can hit a neutral character. They're going to just take the normal effect of command, and that is obviously really powerful. We need another bonus action to recast it, so I'm going to quickly re-level the character with Thief Rogue and test if we can do it multiple times in a turn if we get extra bonus actions. Also, here's just a quick little patch 8 bug while I'm just documenting these. When I re-leveled my character, she just became naked in the preview box here, so that's kind of funny. Oh, wow, look. So I tried it again because I was curious what would happen, and now we're off center in the preview box. So some really funny bugs with respecking your characters in this patch. Just interesting to see as we go about documenting patch 8. I just thought these were hilarious, so I wanted to show them on video. All right, and now we are a Thief Rogue with 6 levels of Glamour Bard, so we have 2 bonus actions. Let's just quickly test if we can use Mantle of Majesty multiple times in a given turn. So I'm just going to enter turn-based mode here, and we will cast this. We are now concentrating on it, and yes, indeed, we can. So combined with the Helmet of Grit, you could get up to 3 bonus action commands from Mantle of Majesty. Also worth noting, Mantle of Majesty is concentration. This is a concentration effect. So if you're taking damage during it, you do have the chance of dropping it. So you do have to be a little careful with that if you want to get maximum value out of this effect. But the fact that you can cast multiple commands, I expect that Glamour 6 Thief 3 is going to be one of the best control builds in the game, starting in patch 8. So really awesome there, and of course we'll explore those builds more as I do more multi-classing and more power builds with the new subclasses. All right, let's move on. Next up, this is the one I think a lot of people are most excited for, Death Domain Cleric. Death Domain Cleric, of course, we get right away from the beginning, so let's take a look at what this gives us. Firstly, we are going to be able to take our subclass, and this gives us a few things. It gives us the Toll the Dead cantrip as a bonus cantrip. Actually, it looks like we get to pick from a couple, so we'll take a look at that as well. We get our domain spells, False Life and Ray of Sickness. I will say these are not exciting domain spells to get at first level. Both of these are pretty useless level 1 spells, so you would be better off for domain spell access to be grabbing a different subclass, but Death Domain getting Toll the Dead, I'll talk about this in a minute, is really strong. And also, our Necromancy cantrips that target only 1 creature, and of course, Toll the Dead is Necromancy, can target an additional creature. In tabletop, I believe this is an additional creature within 5 feet. I'm not sure if this has any targeting restrictions on it, so we're going to have to test that, because if this just double casts your Toll the Dead, that's going to be massive. Toll the Dead is an incredibly strong cantrip, and one of the things that clerics are missing in general is early game combat power. So this is going to not only fix your combat power for Death Domain Cleric, it's also the existence of this cantrip is going to make every other cleric even more powerful than they already were, and of course Cleric was already one of the best classes. Let me just make sure that, yeah, Toll the Dead is available to other subclasses. So this is not only going to change how Death Domain works, it's going to change how every Cleric subclass works by making them vastly more powerful in early game combat. It's a wisdom saving throw, which is a pretty good save to target. Lots of enemies have low wisdom saves, and it deals a d8 of necrotic damage, which of course is the same as Sacred Flame. But if they're not at full health, you deal a d12 of necrotic damage. Having enemies not be at full health is pretty easy to manage. There's lots of ways to do incidental chip damage to enemies. So you're going to be doing a d12 of damage with your cantrip up to 3d12 at max level. very easily, and that's a lot of cantrip damage for character when you're not spending any resources. Of course, for the Death Domain Cleric, you're going to be doubling that because you're hitting 2 enemies. 6d12 damage before any other modifiers off of a single cast of a cantrip is a really ridiculous amount of damage, so that's very powerful. What other cantrips do we have access to? We also have, Bursting Sinew. 1d10 piercing damage, explode a corpse, causing it to impale those around it. Now, of course, the tooltip here does not tell us the AoE on that, but an AoE damage cantrip for a d10 of damage at a 60-foot range is pretty good. The dex save is a little unfortunate. Dex is not typically a good save to target. It is going to make... enemies will pass their dex saves very reliably. It's usually the second worst one to target after strength. So Bursting Sinew is going to be pretty unreliable, but if it's AoE damage from a cantrip at range, that's not bad if the enemies are standing near the corpse. I think this is going to be much more situational, and you probably won't end up using it very often, but it is very cool. And we'll see if Death Domain Clerics get other effects related to Bursting Sinew. Most of the time, I think you're going to be taking Toll the Dead and just the normal cantrips that you would always take, Guidance, Resistance, and like Blade Ward or whatever. But Toll the Dead is going to be, for pretty much every cleric, the new go-to damage cantrip at level 1, and is going to vastly improve clerics' early game combat capabilities. At character level 2, we get another Death Domain Cleric ability, and that is Channel Divinity, Touch of Death. When you hit a creature with a melee attack, you can use your Channel Divinity to deal extra necrotic damage. Guys, I know I talk about this a lot. This is a pet peeve of mine. They have got to put numbers in these tooltips, and they need to make them accurate. The tooltips just lying to you when you level up is, honestly, kind of ridiculous, and the fact that there's no number for how much extra damage you deal in this tooltip is absurd. It would be so easy to just put the number in. In tabletop, this is 5 extra damage plus twice your Death Domain Cleric level, so it would be 9 extra damage for 1 Channel Divinity, starting at level 2, and then going to increase at later levels. This actually makes your melee attacks pretty relevant, so we'll test if it's the same damage as it is in tabletop, but 9 extra burst damage on a melee attack means that Death Domain Cleric does have the occasional burst damage, especially if you're using like a dagger or something, so you can attack with your dexterity and not have to invest in strength in order to actually land that hit, or if you have a way to attack with wisdom, like a weapon that lets you use your spellcasting modifier to attack with, like the Infernal Rapier or something. That actually is a relevant amount of burst damage. At maximum level, that would be 29 extra damage, which for one hit, 30 extra damage, that's kind of like getting extra attack, because often an attack will be about 30 damage. So this is a pretty relevant feature for dealing melee damage. I don't think it'll come up that often, but when it does, it will be a pretty big burst of damage. Unless they've changed the numbers, which we have no way of knowing until I test it in combat. Level 3, of course, we get 2 more domain spells. So we've got Blindness, again, a fairly weak spell. Not horrible, but not one that we're really excited to have. And Ray of Enfeeblement, again, a fairly weak spell. So the Death Domain spells at low levels are not that exciting, but just being able to deal double damage with our very powerful cantrips is already a really powerful early game ability, so we don't need really strong domain spells in order for the character to be good at these early levels. Gonna speed through leveling up here as we get to level 4, where we get no new features. We'll just grab Alert, we get a new cantrip. Of course, we'll take the unique new cantrip so that we can test that out. And then at level 5, we get 2 more domain spells. Animate Dead is a very solid one to have. This one's always going to be useful. And Vampiric Touch is terrible. So the theme of not very exciting domain spells does continue. But Animate Dead is a pretty solid one that we'll be happy to have. Running around with an army, of course, is very, very strong. We also get Destroy Undead, which lets us kill enemy undead more effectively. But every cleric gets that. So really the main bonus here is that we finally get a good domain spell, which is something that Death Cleric has been missing up until this point. Level 6, we get another subclass feature, and that is Inescapable Destruction. Spells you cast ignore resistance to necrotic damage. This is going to be a feature of a lot of builds, I think. I expect that if you get like 6 levels in Death Domain Cleric for necrotic damage, ignoring necrotic damage resistance, not existence, that you actually don't want to ignore. And then 6 levels in Sorcerer, you could do a pretty cool twinned Toll the Dead build where you like quicken a doubled Toll the Dead and then cast another doubled Toll the Dead. Enemies won't have resistance, which is very useful because there's a lot of resistant enemies in Baldur's Gate. So this ability is pretty cool, and I expect we're going to see a lot of builds based around maximizing Toll the Dead because it's such a powerful cantrip. Level 7. We're going to get some new domain spells, and these are Death Ward. Again, not that exciting, and Blight. This is certainly good if you're doing a necrotic damage focused burst caster, then Blight is not terribly irrelevant. Of course, it works very, very well with the Staff of Cherished Necromancy, which is going to be probably the go-to equipment for this character, so that you can free cast Blight without spending spell slots on it. You'll ignore resistance to necrotic damage because of your class feature, and so that's going to make the character a pretty good nuke spellcaster for single target nuking, especially if you combine it with sorcerer levels or fighter levels to action surge and cast more spells. There's a lot of different ways that you're going to be able to empower this character to do a ton of extra damage. So Death Domain, I think, is not only going to be just a very strong default cleric, but will also enable a whole category of necrotic damage focused builds, which didn't really exist in Baldur's Gate beforehand because so many enemies are resistant or immune. And this will let you use that alongside, especially the Staff of Cherished Necromancy, for devastating effect. Character level 8. We get another subclass ability, so Divine Strike necrotic damage. Once per turn, we deal an extra d8 of necrotic damage, which, remember, ignores enemy resistance. We can combine that with our Channel Divinity for a pretty solid melee hit with this character. You're probably not going to build your Death Domain Cleric around melee damage, but you do get, like, once or twice per short rest, a pretty big burst of damage with a melee attack. So if you're out of spells, this character will not be embarrassing in melee, which is kind of nice for a cleric who often wants to be up in the mix and uses their spell slots pretty aggressively, has no way to recover spell slots naturally. So often is your first character to run out of resources in a party. Having the character be able to fall back on these pretty solid melee hits is going to mean that you can take longer adventuring days without having to give up on them. Of course, we'll just boost our wisdom here and then keep leveling up. And we get 2 more domain spells. Contagion, again, a pretty weak spell overall. There are some things that you can do with Contagion because it lets you hit enemies with stuns, but for a level 5 spell slot, not usually exciting. Cloud Kill is kind of a nice one as a domain spell. This isn't a spell that you're going to cast every combat, but as a domain spell, just having access to it for when it's good is pretty solid. I think that Cloud Kill is a decent damage spell, decent but situational damage spell, but when enemies are grouped up, it does a pretty decent amount of damage. The important thing with Cloud Kill is it does the damage when you cast it on enemies and then again at the beginning of their turn. So 5d8 seems terrible for a level 5 spell, but it's actually 10d8 before they get to act. And then, of course, more if you can keep them trapped in the area of the Cloud Kill and the fight continues to last more turns. So this can be a pretty good damage spell if you're fighting enemies in an enclosed location, or you can keep them trapped inside it, or you just need a burst of AoE damage to finish off a bunch of enemies. So overall, I think this is a pretty decent domain spell to have. The domain spells that are best for Death Domain are Animate Dead and Cloud Kill, I think, and honestly, that's not an exciting list. One of the things that makes cleric subclasses good is how good their domain spells are, but the Death Domain Cleric's abilities are so strong that I think a relatively weaker domain spell list is justified because the class abilities are incredibly powerful. Keeping on leveling up here, and we're going to go to Cleric level 10. Nothing new at this level. I'm just going to quickly skim through and make sure there's no other prepared spells that I'm missing. Doesn't look like it, just like new spells that they might have added. Just the 2 cantrips it looks like. And at level 11, of course, we get the same level 6 spells. No level 6 domain spells at this level, so nothing new from that perspective, but obviously level 6 cleric spells are great. And then at level 12, we have maxed out our Death Domain Cleric, and I think this character is going to be quite strong. I think it is stronger than the weak. I think it's not quite as strong as Tempest or Light Domain, which are still going to be the really strong clerics, and I think it's probably a little bit weaker than Nature Cleric, which gets slightly better, which gets much better domain spells mostly with spike growth, plant growth, and so on. But the early game combat power that this brings is really powerful. So especially if you want to take early fights, I think Death Domain Cleric is an excellent pick. And I also think it's going to enable a lot of builds. I think it is solidly upper middle of the cleric domains in terms of power. I would probably put it at number 4 after Tempest, Light, and Nature. But the power that this but obviously number 4 out of the ludicrously strong cleric subclasses is still an incredibly strong character. Death Domain Cleric, I think, is going to be an excellent contender, and the early game damage that you get from doubled Toll the Deads is going to make the early game for clerics so much smoother. The fact that other clerics now get access to that as well is going to make cleric even more of one of the best classes than it already was. Okay, so let's look at our cleric subclass abilities. So firstly, we've got Toll the Dead. So we can, you can target people anywhere. They do not have to be close to each other. That is really powerful. This is basically just twin spell. So doubling your Toll the Dead effects, or also Bone Chill. I guess it probably works for Inflict Wounds, or no, Inflict Wounds is a level 1 spell. But it will double the damage of Bone Chill if you get that from another effect, and double Toll the Dead from another class. Double Toll the Dead is really, really good. So this is a really strong ability, and the fact that it operates at any range is incredible. That's going to make this character, right from the beginning of the game, probably your best damage dealer at levels like 1 through 3. Just with the double Toll the Dead cantrip, because that's such a powerful amount of damage. Let's also look at the Bursting Sinew cantrip, which is 3d10 piercing. Not bad for a cantrip in an AoE. Looking at a corpse here, oh, that's a big radius, actually. I think that's a 10-foot radius. So that's going to be... and you can... Oh, it counts as targeting a single creature, so we can double it. Wait, can I double it on the same character? Oh, actually, can I Toll the Dead twice on the same character? I didn't even check that. Yes, it looks like we can Toll the Dead twice on the same character. Wow. Okay, so yeah, it is just a twin spell. That's incredible. And we can double Bursting Sinew on any corpse. You can actually even change the radii. Neat. So that's a lot of damage that you can do in an AoE with doubled Bursting Sinew. That is a lot of burst damage in an AoE with a cantrip. So those abilities are even stronger than they looked like on paper, because you can double them up on the same character. You can do a bunch of extra damage with them as well. Let's look at our reactions here. So we're going to go ahead and pick up our reactions and take a look here. So Touch of Death, +5, +2d12. Okay, so that's significantly worse than the tabletop version of this effect, which would be at this point +5, +24, not 2d12. So Touch of Death, quite a bit nerfed, but I guess that the doubled effects were buffed. So the nerf to this makes sense. And this kind of nerfs something that's only a nice to have and buffs something that you're going to be using all the time. So this character, I think, is more powerful than the tabletop version of Death Cleric. Divine Strike Necrotic, yeah, extra d8 of damage. So that's still a decent amount of burst damage, but the reaction attack, the Touch of Death reaction is not as good as I thought. But the two cantrips are, and especially the twinning effect that you just get passively for free all the time, is wildly better than I thought. So Death Domain Cleric, I think, it might take over from Nature Cleric as the strongest early game cleric, and is going to be incredibly powerful, especially if you're building around dealing damage with those cantrips, then doubling up on them, casting them multiple times per turn if you take sorcerer levels or whatever, that's going to be an incredibly strong strategy for massive damage output. Love what I'm seeing there. All right, my friends, I had originally intended for this to be a 2-part video, and then I was like, no, I love yapping too much. I'm going to make this a 3-part video. We'll cover 4 each time. But actually, it turns out I love yapping even more than my estimate. So we're going to probably break this into 4 parts where we look at 3 classes each time. Next time, when I come back, we will be looking at the Circle of Stars Druid, the Arcane Archer Fighter, and the Drunken Master Monk. So, of course, look forward to that. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the subclasses in Patch 8 of Baldur's Gate 3. I hope it gives you some ideas for cool builds that we can do, and I hope it was helpful to get a breakdown of how the abilities actually work. Of course, if you have enjoyed the video, then feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out with the algorithm, so of course I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And you can subscribe to my channel for the remaining subclass breakdowns, Baldur's Gate 3 builds, and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.